Thank you so much. And this is the annual family reunion that we all knew we needed. And we all love to attend. So I'm so grateful to see so many who have traveled from around the country. I met someone who came here from California for this event, which is fantastic. And I don't believe that the TI community has ever gathered in this way before. So I want to make sure that you know you are most welcome here. Make this your annual gathering, please. We'd love to have you. It's such a joy to celebrate the Thomistic Institute, which turned 15 this year, right? And the incredible work that they do to strengthen the formation of Christians at universities, in the church, and in the wider public square. You can listen to them on the go on your phone. It makes sense, then, that the Catholic Information Center, the closest tabernacle to the White House at the heart of the city, built to accompany Catholic leaders working in our nation's capital to live an integrated life, would honor a partner in the fight and a model for others in the church, the collaboration necessary to respond to the call to evangelize, a call that faces unprecedented challenges and division and threats today. In the new evangelization, we support each other in our shared emphasis on young professionals, the importance of the intellectual life and tradition. TI is on campus in what we affectionately call Little Rome. And we at the CIC, we meet on K Street, at the center of the swamp. It's this bridge we've built across the city, a way to divide and conquer for the kingdom, if you will. So now, before we bring up Father Thomas Joseph White and Father Dominic, whose last name I can't pronounce, to come up and receive the John Paul II New Evangelization Award and share their riveting reflections, we at the CIC, and on behalf of the Board of Directors, we wanted to speak the Thomistic Institute language and use your methods to explain our decision to honor your great work. And so we thought we would get some help from the boss in explaining our decision to honor our friends.
800 years before anyone had ever heard of the new evangelization, the Dominicans were already practicing it. Using the recent revival of Aristotelian philosophy as their starting point, the scholastics presented the Christian faith in the terms of their time. This evening, we honor their successors at the Thomistic Institute, who harnessed 21st century tools to spread the much-needed message of the gospel on college campuses, online, and beyond. And, as their namesake, I think I speak for everyone at the Thomistic Institute when I say that inasmuch as honor is the recognition of excellence, justice demands that before accepting this award, we must first examine whether such praise is in accord with reason. Let's dive in, shall we? As a first objection, it would seem that any new evangelization effort requires an element of novelty. The Thomistic Institute, however, is grounded in the Dominican tradition, a tradition that stretches back 8 centuries. Therefore, no Thomist can do anything original or creative without acting contrary to his own nature. I reply, excuse you. Yes, summa means summary, but that doesn't mean it wasn't something new. In fact, I wrote it specifically because there wasn't anything like it out there. Likewise, with something like Me 101, Aquinas 101, while the content is rooted in tradition, the form and presentation are both novel and needed, as evidenced by their enthusiastic reception and the spirited debate they generate. 931 replies? Jeez, people think I'm long-winded. However, Even if we grant that Thomistic creativity is possible, it remains the case that all prior recipients of this award have been individuals. Therefore, TI, as a plurality of persons, cannot be counted among the awardees without a natural contradiction. I reply that what defines all prior award winners is not any accident of quantity, but rather a unity of purpose. As our Lord said, "By their fruits you shall know them." And if the good works of the TI require collective effort, as they surely do, then reason demands that they should likewise be honored collectively, as befitting this unity. And what fruits they are! The intellectual and spiritual formation of young adults at the highest level, the building of authentic Christian community, the model combination of priest and lay leadership, truly a plentiful harvest. Finally, it could be objected that tonight's gala is a glorious affair. However, the men and women of TI are a humble group eschewing the spotlight. Therefore, it is contrary to charity to invite them to such an event as may inflame otherwise unknown feelings of pride. I reply that the sin of pride consists in thinking of oneself as greater than one is. If tonight's honors make the men and women of TI feel proud of their selfless work in forming the next generation of Catholic leaders, then this is no sin, but rather, as the philosopher says, the proper reward of virtue. Now, as to the fitness of honoring such an unassuming group at such a glorious banquet, I'll be honest, the only fitness I'm interested in tonight is fitting this whole thing in my mouth. In closing, it is truly right and just that the Thomistic Institute should be honored with tonight's award. However, lest you think my argument's only so much nepotistic straw, and bearing in mind the Apostles' admonition that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established, I submit to you the concurring judgment of the esteemed biographer. The moral and intellectual meltdown in American higher education is being effectively challenged by the Thomistic Institute, which sheds Catholic light upon dark alleys of ignorance, bias, and wokery, and invites students to live in the truth. Likewise, the orator, the Thomistic Institute is a remarkable wellspring of formation and encounter, an oasis of hope in a divided and transactional country. And finally, the publican, who, by the way, I've never had a pint with. The Thomistic Institute is a strong and full-throated rebuke to the lie that Christians are unserious and uninterested when it comes to science and rigorous philosophy. I'm glad we're on the same team, because I wouldn't want to go up against you. Man, talk about a sensus fidelium. I guess not every question needs to be disputed after all, huh? On behalf of these distinguished voices then, and all gathered here tonight, allow me to raise a toast to the Thomistic Institute and to all the great and holy work you do. I will never object to sharing my name with you. Cheers.
Now I am honored to call to the stage Father Thomas Joseph White and Father Dominic Legge and present to them on behalf of the Thomistic Institute the 2024 John Paul II New Evangelization Award. Thank you, Fathers, for your leadership. Thank you.
That was a wonderful surprise. That video, I think we have a patent on that now for the Aquinas 101. Fantastic. You know, I have just a few informal things to say before I make my formal remarks, and we're sharing this moment of thanks. I think Father Dominic Legge and I are just so grateful to the CIC that we honestly could not express vocally and in enough words, you know, rich with enough rich significations, the gratitude, the sense of fraternal care and kindness on the part of our brethren at the CIC, and just our gratitude to all of you for coming tonight. I can remember, I don't know if I can say this without getting upset, but I remember, I think it was in Mary Eberstadt's, she was here tonight, in her backyard. It might have been about 4 or 5 months before Father Arnie Panula died, and he was dying of cancer. And we were standing there talking. I mean, he's there gently talking to us as he's, you know, knows he's going to die. And he said, with such joy and humility, he said, I am hoping that the Lord will give me the beatific vision so I can see God, if he will grant me that grace. And he said it with such joy and with such humility. It was, you know, it's such a wonderful person. When I first started working with the CIC, it was as a young priest in Washington, where I had a career for 10 years before I went to Rome. And Father Arnie was so welcoming, and he and Mitch invited me to speak to the first ever series of the Leonine Scholars, Leonine Forum. I did it every year for 10 years. I had such an incredible experience of talking to young people in DC. I spoke about my books there. I had wonderful engagements with so many of the young people who were there present, and it was always an inspiration to me in my own priesthood. Father Charles has always been just a great friend and colleague, and I think the work that is being done, the earlier video that is a beautiful testimony to the work of the CIC, was like, you know, the tip of the iceberg of the thousands of people whose lives are transformed by the work of this great organization. So one afternoon in Brooklyn, 2 senior Jewish rabbis, both old men, were sitting on a park bench talking. And one of them said to the other, you know, I've been thinking about my life and how much I've done for the regional religious community and all the lifelong contributions I've made to society. And, you know, finally I have to say to myself at the end of the day, you know, what am I? Truly, I am nothing. And the second rabbi responded, and he said, you know, I too, I've spent my life in service of our local community, and I've made my contributions. But as I look back over my life, I think, you know, what am I? Truly, I am nothing. At that time, a 10-year-old Jewish boy wearing a yarmulke and tefillin was nearby playing, and he was hitting a ball with a stick. Overhearing the 2 men, he said aloud in turn, and I too, as I survey my life, I say, what am I? Truly, I am nothing. The first rabbi turned to the second rabbi and he said, can you believe this kid? He's hardly 10 years old and he already thinks he's nothing. As this clever story suggests, the rabbis know on some level they're not really nothing, but it suggests that they are only something effective because everything is given to them by God. And so in a more serious tone, we hear Catholic saints agree with the idea that may at first seem paradoxical. St. Catherine of Siena famously says in her dialogue, in the voice of God the Father, daughter, I am he who is, you are she who is not. And Teresa of Avila says, we are the only hands that God has. If you put the 2 ideas together, we are given all we are from God, and we are given all we are to be something for God. So it's apt in this regard to note that the St. John Paul II Award for Evangelization this year has been given not to an individual, but to an organization, and we might honestly even say to a nascent movement. The Thomistic Institute is, after all, basically a communion of persons, and a movement of persons committed to the study of the truth and the communication of the truth in the service of God and in the search for God. Behind this communion, this service, this search, there is the not entirely hidden presence of God, and indeed, I would think, of Christ. I am the truth, the way, and the life. Inspiring the TI, its leadership, its admirable personnel, the friars, the many lay and religious speakers who contribute to it, its incredibly generous benefactors, and above all, its student leaders and student participants. In all this, there is the manifestation of a shared love of the truth and a confidence in the truth. Even in the midst of the modern secular university, even in the midst of a society that seems increasingly disoriented or indifferent spiritually or intellectually. In fact, especially in such a context, there needs to be a vibrant and clear testimony to the reality of God, to the mystery of God, and to the dignity of the human person made in the image of God from conception to natural death, as well as a testimony to the mystery of the church, locus of salvation and sanctification, pillar and bulwark of the truth, not an institution that is defensive, but an institution that is illuminative, that can help heal us and guide us and lead us into deeper unity and love of others. This testimony is one conducted not only by way of assertion, but also by way of research and serious thought and disciplined argument, accompanied by the love of God and genuine worship and contemplation of God. We want our students to love God and contemplate God in the Eucharist, even as they also dispute and argue and think and research. This is something the Thomistic Institute does do in achieving a kind of synthetic habit of life and mind. Pope John Paul II, in a visit to our country, spoke in an unequivocal way to the Christians of our generation. "Dear young people of America," he said, "listen to his voice. Do not be afraid. Open your hearts to Christ. The deepest joy there is in life is the joy that comes from God and is found in Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He is the hope of the world." And it's also pertinent to recall what this great pontiff stated in his first encyclical, Redemptor Hominis, in the face of the atheistic regimes of the communist period. And it's a longer quote, but it's just so powerful. Please bear with me. He wrote the following: "Jesus Christ meets the man of every age, including our own, with the same words. You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. These words contain both a fundamental requirement and a warning. The requirement of an honest relationship with regard to truth as a condition for authentic freedom, and the warning to avoid every kind of illusory freedom, every superficial, unilateral freedom, every freedom that fails to enter into the whole truth about man and the world. Today also, even after 2,000 years, we see Christ as the one who brings man freedom based on truth, frees man from what curtails, diminishes, and as it were, breaks off this freedom at its root in man's soul, his heart, and his conscience. What a stupendous confirmation of this has been given and is still being given by those who, thanks to Christ and in Christ, have reached true freedom and have manifested it even in situations of external constraint. In the course of so many centuries, of so many generations, from the time of the apostles on, is it not Jesus Christ himself that has made an appearance at the side of people judged for the sake of the truth? And has he not gone to death with people condemned for the sake of the truth? Does he ever cease to be the continuous spokesman and advocate for the person who lives in spirit and in truth? I remember the day about 7 years ago when Father Dominic Legge and I had first conceived of the plan of creating a chapter of the Thomistic Institute specifically for young professionals and adults living in Washington, D.C. We'd already created a number of chapters in the Northeast. We had a first gathering for young professionals at the Brooklyn Pint near the Dominican House of Studies, and a former student chapter leader who had helped found our first chapter at Yale came to the lunch to help host it. This is a young person, now professor, named Daniel Gordon. and he was invited to welcome those present at the lunch. He stood up, and to our surprise, he said, "We are the Thomistic Institute, and this is what we do." And then he proceeded to explain the purpose of the TI and how it worked. And I think Father Legge and I felt a little like the two old rabbis. We were suddenly relative to a new generation, and we saw immediately the power of this form of this movement, that our students were themselves the principal protagonists of the endeavor. Today, by the way, Daniel's married, he has a child, he has a PhD from the University of Notre Dame in theology, and he's teaching as a young professor at Ave Maria University. He has 2 books in publication on the theology of Thomas Aquinas. None of that would have happened, I think he himself would say, if it hadn't been for the TI chapter at Yale. He is one of thousands of students, indeed we could really even say hundreds of thousands, who have been impacted by the TI, its on-campus and online presence, and the witness to the faith generated by the study of the thought of Thomas Aquinas and other great figures in the Catholic intellectual tradition.
Well, allow me to just incorporate by reference everything that Father Thomas Joseph just said so beautifully. I have to say this has been an overwhelming experience to be honored this evening by the Catholic Information Center and by all of you. The presence of all of you is a tremendous gift, I can say, I know, for Father Thomas Joseph and also for myself and for everyone who is associated with the Thomistic Institute. It's a tremendous honor to receive this also on behalf of our province. Father Alan Moran, our prior provincial, is here. Father Thomas Petrie and Father Dominic Legge, the president and dean of the Pontifical Faculty at the Dominican House of Studies, to which the Thomistic Institute belongs. Also, Father Ambrose Little and Father Gregory Pine, they're assistant directors of the Thomistic Institute. They're not here on the stage, but they're a very important part of the success. And our whole team, most of them are here tonight, but our benefactors, our TI speakers, all of our student leaders. But I wanted to say that it's especially meaningful to me that we would be honored in this way, because this award is dedicated to Pope St. John Paul II, first of all, and secondly, because it's an award that comes from our friends at the CIC. And that's very touching for me personally because of what the CIC stands for and for what it's done for me personally. When I arrived in Washington, D.C. in 1997 as a young lawyer, I worked just a few blocks from here. I had met the Dominicans for the first time in law school, and they helped me return to the regular practice of the faith after drifting away a bit in undergrad. But I still had a lot of spiritual growth to do when I showed up here in D.C. And God provided for me very richly in those years, because it turned out that my office was just a short walk from the CIC. I popped in one day. I bought a copy of John Paul II's great encyclical, Veritatis Splendor. I vividly remember taking it home and reading it sitting on my bed. The encyclical, as you may know, opens with a meditation of the encounter of Jesus with the rich young man. And John Paul frames the young man's question to him as fundamental, a question that every human being must ask. What good must I do to have eternal life? At the end of this encounter, Jesus calls the rich young man, "Sell what you have, give to the poor, then come follow me." And when I read those words and John Paul's powerful meditation on them, it was like having a mirror held up to my own life. And I thought, could God be calling me to the priesthood? So I began to attend daily Mass at the CIC and go to regular confession. And the graces that I received led me to seek out the Dominicans in Washington, D.C., and I discovered that the Dominican House of Studies was just across town. So you can see how important the CIC has been for my life. I might not be standing here in this habit had it not been for that. Becoming a Dominican and a priest are among the greatest blessings I've ever received, and I owe thanks, first of all, to God for his grace and mercy to me, and then, of course, also to Pope St. John Paul II, and to the CIC and everyone who makes it possible, and that means all of you. So thank you for what you are doing for the CIC. Keep it going. Make it stronger. The blessings it's bringing to people are immense and far more than we see. If you'd indulge me for just a minute longer, I'd like to say something a little bit about the work of the Thomistic Institute and why it seems to be growing and finding success. What's important about the thought of Thomas Aquinas today? I think Aquinas is important because he has a genius, and his great genius is not so much being original, although he has lots of important original thoughts, but he is a synthesizer of the great wealth of wisdom. Wisdom, above all, found in the scriptures and in the church fathers, but also gathered from ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and even medieval Arab thought. He's able to bring this together because I think he received a special divine gift of wisdom. And that gave him a unique grasp of the whole, and thus the capacity to see how new truths fit into that whole. Even truths proclaimed by thinkers very distant from him. So you can see why that is so important today. We need that wisdom. We need a way to fit it all into one. And we need to be able to speak to everyone and every truth, wherever it is found. For many centuries, Catholic thought, and therefore also Catholic preaching, Catholic teaching, apologetics, the formation of the faithful, had Aquinas' synthesis as a kind of backbone. Now, that's not to say that Aquinas has the answer to every question, but it's a little like a body's skeleton that connects the different parts together and helps it to stand up and allows it to move. So if you want to learn more about Aquinas' synthesis, go to aquinas101.com or subscribe to our podcast. If you're not familiar, that's the, our I think maybe trademarked images were being... As you know, in the middle of the 20th century, there was a self-conscious move away from Aquinas in search of some new mode of thought that might better conform to the currents of the 20th century. But since that time, it's become clear that too few Catholics know the basics of the Catholic faith. And I think evidence suggests that our own institutions have not been successful enough at catechizing our own people, let alone evangelizing a surrounding culture that is increasingly secular and needs an encounter with the truth of Jesus Christ. In my experience, many young people feel like they live in the midst of constant flux. They hunger for something authentic, something with depth and stability, something that gives them meaning. And they rarely find this in universities. There are some very important exceptions. Across the street from us is the Catholic University of America. But there are many universities, many that seem to have lost their way, and students who take chemistry and then literature and then economics and then psychology will ask, how do you put all this together? And is there anyone at the university who's prepared to tell them? St. Thomas is a master at precisely this. And that's, I think, why many young people are looking more and more to Aquinas. We also found that another key ingredient to what we've seen has been really putting the students in charge of their chapters. I won't go on at length about this. You probably already know what I'm talking about, but we have student clubs at universities around the country, now almost 100 campuses, And the students themselves form the clubs, they register with their campus, they invite Catholic speakers. We coach them on who to invite and how to run a successful event. And then we pay the costs of the speaker coming to their campus. And that has just exploded in a way that we never dreamed. I mean, we started this, just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing if it would stick, and it did stick. And so we decided to throw more spaghetti against the wall, and that's what we're still doing. The spiritual impact of all of this has really amazed us. If you'd indulge me at just telling you one brief anecdote, this summer we held a conference. We call it our Veritas Conference. We had 250 student leaders, student members, alumni, and at the concluding Mass, I invited each of them to reflect on their vocation. And, I've been a priest for 17 years, and I've celebrated lots of Masses. But after my first Mass, I think this was the most powerful Mass I have ever said. Because something was happening in the Basilica, the crypt church of the Basilica across the street from the Dominican house. I started by talking about seeking out your vocation to marriage, and I offered Father Dominic's rules for dating. Now, I won't give you all my rules for dating, but I know there are lots of young people here. Some are single, so I'm going to give at least the first rule to you. This is for the guys. If you like her, ask her out. You don't need to know any of the other rules if you don't follow rule number 1. So I said this to the students because we had 250 single Catholic students. But I think there are probably some single Catholic young professionals here. So I think I can say it to people in this room. Guys, tonight, before 10 p.m., if you like her, ask her out. Please, it's for the good of the whole church. But more importantly, offer your life to God. And I said this to the students, and they took it very seriously. We paused for silence after Holy Communion. I told them we would do this, and I invited them to simply listen to what God is asking them to do with their lives. And it was amazing. I was crying. Father Gregory Pine was crying. A lot of the students were crying. After the Mass was over, at a big function like this, people get up and they're moving to the next thing. No one got up. And then someone intoned the Salve Regina. It was not planned by us. And it was beautiful. And at the end, no one got up. And someone else intoned the Regina Caeli, and I began to wonder, how long are they going to sing? But we spoke with students for hours afterwards because they're hungry to find the meaning of their lives. So what we've learned is that simply exposing people, young people especially, but lots of people, to the riches of the Catholic faith, and especially to its teachings and its intellectual tradition, is sometimes all it takes for the grace of God to become rooted in the soul. You don't even have to be especially good at speaking, and God will take over. So there's no reason at all for Catholics in the public square, in Washington, D.C., in Ivy League institutions, or anywhere else to be hesitant about proposing the Catholic faith, because it's true. And there are plenty of people with elite credentials and prestigious appointments who don't have it. And as John Paul II says, the truth imposes itself by its own power. He knew that speaking the truth is like a secret weapon. And that's the secret to the CIC too. In the midst of secular Washington, D.C., the CIC is a beacon of truth and a locus of sacramental grace. So on behalf of the great many people who've worked for the evangelization of Washington, D.C., and for students and universities, and who are being honored by this award, allow me to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Thomas Joseph and Father Dominic, for your wisdom, your dedication, for all you are doing to bring the truth to our universities and everywhere, really, through the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. This concludes our dinner. Please join us for the after party in the foyer here. It's the best after party in the city. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Anyway, and may God bless you all. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.